Um, we are going to be recording this session, as you just heard. If you don't want to be part of the recording, all you have to do is just turn off your video and your microphone. The way that you do that is there's a little in the left-hand corner, there's a microphone and a video camera button. So you can turn those off at any point if you desire. But we are recording the program so that we can share this content with people who weren't able to make it to this live session. My name is Andy Price. I am the Director of Philanthropy and Events at PAWS. We're so excited to have this conversation today, and it's very timely because August is actually Make a Will month. So this is a really good month to be thinking about a will, whether that's creating one for the first time or just updating it, which is something that we should all be thinking about doing on a regular basis. I'm going to introduce our speakers in just a second, but I also want to say that if at any point you have questions during the presentation, you can drop those into the chat. There's an icon in the middle of your screen at the bottom that's looks like a little chat bubble. So you can type in questions there. We will also have time at the end for a live Q&A as well. So we're going to get into it here, and I am going to introduce our speakers. We have two special guests with us today. The first is Larry Simons. He is a philanthropy officer here at PAWS. He has spent his career helping people achieve their financial goals, first as a financial planner and now as our philanthropy officer here. Larry's background in financial planning gives him a really unique and valuable perspective on charitable giving, and helps him guide folks through thinking about the impact they can have as they think about their legacy with charitable causes. So thank you, Larry, for being here today. And we are
okay.
I'm just going along. Thanks, yeah. Larry.
I'm so anxious to jump in. Sorry. So
no, you're good. You're good. Our other speaker today is Patrick Schmidt. He is the co-founder of FreeWill, which is an organization that partners with nonprofits like PAWS to provide free will creation, stock donation, and IRA donation tools to supporters. He has worked in and around nonprofits and philanthropy for many years and was recently included in Town & Country's list of the top 50 philanthropists in the world. We're really lucky to have him here today to be an expert and a guiding voice on this really important topic. And I'm just glad that you all will get to meet him because Larry and I enjoy working with him very, very much. We're going to hear from Patrick in just a second, but first, Larry has some really exciting and special updates to share on a really, just a really unique patient that we have in our Wildlife Center right now. Larry, do you want to take it away and talk about what we've got going on at the Wildlife Center?
Sure, thank you. And let me add my welcome to everyone to help us celebrate Make a Will Month. And not only are we fortunate to have Patrick today, we're really fortunate that we're able to have a partnership with FreeWill, and hopefully you'll all see what these amazing tools can do. I try to begin these sessions by sharing a few stories just to remind, not that everyone needs reminders, about some of the amazing things that PAWS does. And everyone's aware, I think, of the recent spate of hot weather and the incredible fires that have cropped up, not only here in the Northwest, but in California. And in California, there have been several bear cubs that have gotten news being caught in the forest fires. We've had our own issues here, and I'd like to share a story. We've got a little video to share a story about a very recent patient here at the PAWS Wildlife Center. In fact, just came in a little over a week ago. And but rather than telling you, I think we'll share some video, after which Patrick will talk to us about wills and the importance of will planning. Thank you. Now, I have some updates, but I'll share those with you a little later as we close up. I don't want to take any more time from Patrick's opportunity to share with us. So thank you, Patrick.
Great, happy to do so. And welcome everybody. Larry, thank you for sharing that video. It's extremely compelling, and which also leads into my next point, which is I'm actually in Anchorage, Alaska at the moment, coming to you from there. And so it's been a bit windy here. If the Wi-Fi goes out, I'll just be back on in a moment. So settle in, don't do it. Don't panic. And then separately, relatedly, there was a giant black bear in our front yard this morning. So this topic is very, very close to home at the moment. So those bears seem to be doing quite well. So our goals today are really two parts, right? First, we'll help you prepare or help you think about how to create a free estate plan. And then two, help you understand how to make a greater impact with your charitable giving. So those are the two big goals. We'll probably go for about 15 or 20 minutes. And if we achieve this, we'll be in great shape. Just a very quick introduction. My name is Patrick. As Larry mentioned, I'm really lucky to be the co-founder and co-CEO of FreeWill, alongside my wonderful co-founder, Jenny, who lives out on Bainbridge Island, so not far from some of you. And we're really blessed to be part of the FreeWill team, which is now over 100 people and has raised almost $3.5 billion for a wide variety of charities. So a lot of really wonderful people all around the country. But let's talk about estate planning. So as Larry mentioned, it's Make a Will Month, and you're here to learn a bit more about estate planning and what are the powerful things you can do through estate planning. So the first thing to know is that actually the decisions around estate planning are some of the most important things that will happen both individually and as a country. So in the next few decades, there will be almost $70 trillion passed on as baby boomers age. This is the biggest wealth transfer in human history, and it's probably the biggest opportunity for philanthropy in the history of the world. So this is a pretty exciting time to really think about where are all these resources going to go. But one of the big challenges is that many Americans don't actually have an estate plan, or some of them do, but it might be 5 or 7 or 12 years out of date. And the amount of people with an estate plan has actually gone down over time. So this is a Gallup poll, the well-known polling company. You can see it's down to about 33% of respondents who have an estate planning document. When you might think, well, that's only, but it's only young people. But actually, among folks 55 and up, fewer than half have an estate plan. So there's a really big moment here. In the 18 to 34 range, it's really critical as well, and yet fewer than 20% have it. And you might think, well, it's only folks that aren't so well to do, but actually, even among people making more than $80,000 a year, fewer than half of people have an estate plan. So it's a pretty serious topic across the board. And why is that? Well, the biggest reason, so you can see on the far left here, is that people haven't gotten around to it yet. And it's something that people say, I'll do it next year, even though I said that last year. And so one of the big moments around Make a Will Month is really giving us a reason to sort of take some action and get this done. When we ask people how important it is to have a will or a trust, people say extremely important. So this contrasts with the, oh, I haven't done it yet. And so it's a really big moment to think about doing this important thing. So let's actually talk about what are the important things to think about during an estate plan. So sometimes people think of it as a formality or something to do like your taxes, but actually it's one of the most important expressions of your values that will ever happen, right? It's what some of the biggest decisions of your life. And let's talk about what those decisions are so that you can begin to think about them before your plan. So the first one is kids. If something happened to you and you have children, who would look after the kids? A couple of things to think about here. If you're a parent, the surviving spouse will usually get custody. But otherwise, a guardian will be responsible for all your kids' daily needs, things like food, housing, healthcare, education, clothing, all that stuff. And if no guardian is named, a court decides. So that's not really a great outcome. Some important considerations are things that people don't always think about. Things like religious preferences. Do you want the child to be raised in the faith that you are? Physical ability. Maybe your parents seem like a good fit now, but in 10 years, will they be able to keep up with a 12-year-old or a 10-year-old or might be? Emotional stability, financial stability, and then things like geography, right? If it's important for you that the child is raised around certain other people, well, who might be a guardian who's nearby to that group? Also, one really important thing is don't make this a surprise. So if you name someone as your guardian, as the guardian, make sure you have that conversation in advance and don't let that ever be a surprise. Second thing, who actually manages the estate? So every will has what's called an executor in it. So an executor is in a will or trust, and this person is broadly responsible for carrying out your wishes. Things to consider here. Do they actually have time to do it? Or are they too busy? Will they be intimidated by dealing with lawyers or courts or financial advisors? This is a really important one. Do they have the emotional quotient or EQ to deal with loved ones? This is a big challenge. And then also don't make this a surprise either. So if someone's going to be the executor, make sure you at least have a quick conversation in advance. Third thing to think about is who gets the stuff, from cars to real estate to stamp collections to things that are maybe not objectively valuable, but are intrinsically valuable, like photo albums. Choosing who gets what is really important. If you have children, do you want to divide things evenly or according to need, if one child is much better off than the other? Do you want to solicit preferences in advance? So maybe that someone's really tied to that photo album, someone else is really tied to that antique. Do you want to have that conversation? And then should things like real estate or other large assets, should they be sold and the money be divvied up? Or should one child get it? Or should one child or loved one have a chance to buy others out to keep that in the family? Right? These are all part of the conversations and decisions that you want to make. Other things to think about, is there anyone you specifically don't want to receive anything? An estranged spouse, a sibling that you're not in contact with. You want to name that. And then a really important thing, which is an important note to talk about, is there's lots of financial stuff. It's held in what are called non-probate accounts. These are technically what's called payable on death or transfer on death. It means it actually travels outside the will. Some trusts, some retirement accounts, things like 401ks, life insurance policies, some investment accounts. And these are actually not governed by a will. So there's a whole other set of documents there. And then confusing what are called probatable, all this stuff in the will, and non-probatable assets is one of the most common big mistakes that people make. So this is something to pay attention to. Fourth, and I know it's a big one for many of you, who takes care of the pets? So you can't actually leave something to your dog or your cat. Can't do it. They don't qualify as having the legal right of ownership in US common law. But what you can do is leave your dog to someone to make sure that she or he is looked after. And you can leave a specific amount to your pet guardian for the caretaking of your pet. In some more outlandish circumstances, sometimes people even have a trust pay out a specific amount per month or year for the lifetime of the pet. This is not as common, so I wouldn't worry about it for the most part. But this is a big question, right? And also, one more thing, this is another good one to not make a surprise. So make sure you have that conversation in advance. But the pet guardian is really important. Digital assets. Many people now choose to name what's called a digital executor. This is not a legally binding term, and it's not a legally binding document, but it's responsible for managing or closing all your social media accounts, your email, etc. This might also include videos or photos you have on your computer or phone. Who's going to take care of that? You often have a non-legal document that accompanies a will with very specific instructions and passwords. And then sixth thing to think about, do we talk about all this in advance? So one of the really important things is that having a clear, articulate estate plan is step one to prevent any sort of conflict within your family in the aftermath of an unexpected loss when people are particularly emotional. Increasingly, many people are choosing to talk about these decisions as a family in advance, or with your friends or whomever may be the recipient here. But the big risk isn't conflict. The conflict is what makes good movies. But the more important problem in estate planning is confusion. Making sure that the key parties know where the plan is, where the actual document is, and the values and logic behind it will make some of these decisions much easier to carry out. And in some cases, you may be the person in the family who's willing to talk about this, and some other folks won't. Polling shows that overwhelmingly, the majority of millennials, for instance, have never spoken to their parents about estate planning. Many don't know how to broach the topic. So a big tip is frame it in advice or sharing. So you might want to ask, hi, I'm making a will for the first time. How did you both pick an executor? Or you might say, in case anything happens, I want you to know where my plans are. And how did you decide what safe place to use? And so you can start to have this conversation this way, as opposed to going to older relatives and saying, what's in the will or what are your estate plans? The next point is what happens at a funeral? Is having a religious ceremony important to you? You really want to note that. Are there specific songs or readings that are meaningful? Is there someone you want to speak? Or is there someone you don't want to speak? Do you have any burial wishes, places, types? Do you want people to send donations in lieu of flowers? And to where? What charity might be most important to you? And what feeling do you want people to have at the event? This is a really good place to actually start. Is it celebratory? Is it mournful? Is it inspired for action? What might that look like? And then one of the last things to really think about is, do you want to include causes that you love? So many people choose to include gifts to their favorite causes and their favorite nonprofits. Some people focus on just one, while many might leave up to 12 nonprofits in their plans. A typical method, and this is really, really important, is to choose a percentage of a total estate rather than a strict cash amount. So why is this? Well, inflation tends to make it more meaningful overall. And then if as that goes up or down, you want to make sure that that your estate is sort of allocated proportionally. And it's a much easier thing that you don't have to go back and change it all the time if your assets go up or down. And then another note is that notifying the charity makes their lives a lot easier. So what frequently happens is that someone might write into a will and then never tell the charity. And that actually makes it harder to plan, harder to honor you, harder to really understand where you want that gift to go. And so it's going to make the lives of staff at nonprofits much easier when you actually tell folks. So why are we talking about this now? Well, for the first thing is that August is Make a Will Month. And so we've been really celebrating that with a lot of our partners here and really helping thousands of people do their estate plans. Totally free, as you can see here. No catch, no credit cards, all that stuff. It's just a really great service that PAWS is providing its whole community. And so what does that mean? Well, it ends up that August is actually a really, really popular month for will making. Many people make it at work or when they're near their family. And so far, more than 2,000 people have created a will from partnering with nonprofits, helping to really close the gap on the number of Americans without estate plans. Donors have responded with incredible generosity, and more than 500 new bequest commitments have been made to nonprofits across the country. So a bequest commitment, it's just a little bit of jargon. What it really means is a gift to a nonprofit in your will or your trust. And so if you want to take action, we've made this really easy and accessible. So we'll do a quick demo here, and we'll go to PAWS. And let's see this. I trust that you can all see this. So if you go to freewill.com/PAWS, and I'm sure we'll email it out after the fact, just enter your email address, but we'll click Get Started Now. There's a bunch of different explanations here as well. And this is quite simple. So we'll use me as an example. I'm going to use a different email address because I've already used the tools a bit. Enter your name, some really basic information here. My birthday is June 12th, if anyone's curious. I'm a Gemini and born in 1984, and so on and so forth. So we'll enter some addresses. We'll go through this relatively quickly. A little bit more information, looking at asset levels, et cetera. And then we begin to sort of go into all of this. So if you have children, we'll talk through guardian status. If not, you'd skip it, and so on and so forth. And so I won't go through the whole piece here, but it just gives you a little bit of sense of what it looks like. So I want to pause there on the demo, but you can all walk through it on your own. One other really important note here that I want to be clear is that this is a great tool and it will help you make an estate plan in 20 minutes or less. It's also the case that for many people, an attorney is a better plan. And so what you do there is you can actually use all the tools and use it to really get all of your affairs in order, make the decisions in the comfort of your own home. And then there's a separate thing where you can document all your wishes and bring it to an attorney. And that will actually make that process cheaper and quicker with an attorney. So if you have a complicated family situation or you own property overseas or something else, you might want to do that. But this is actually a really wonderful way to get started and get all of the hard work out in the comfort of your own home at no cost, and then bring it to an attorney to finish the job. So that's also on the table as well. So what do we do now? Well, the first thing I'll say is get started. The biggest reason people don't want to do this is because they think it's so finalized. You can always update your will, and you should every few years. You want to inventory non-probate assets. You want to think about this less as a financial chore and more as one of the biggest expressions of your values. Oops. And if you have any questions for PAWS, you can reach out to Larry or Andy at these email addresses. So I'm going to pause sharing my screen now and welcome Larry back to share some updates, and we'll see if there's any questions.
Quickly unmute there. Thank you, Patrick. I always learn. I keep thinking I know so much, and I always learn more when I listen to you. I appreciate that. What I wanted to do before we get to questions is just real quickly give everyone an update on our Cedar Creek wildfire bear cub that we visited in the video ahead of time. And I see quite a few people joined us as we were progressing. So please know that we'll have that video available. It's already uploaded to YouTube. So you can see it for the first time or revisit it. But this morning I got a quick update to let everyone know that how the bear is doing. And just the other day, they were able to install what we call a howdy door, because we have two other bear cubs in care, and this will allow the bears at their own pace to get comfortable with each other, smell, get comfortable, and hopefully begin to interact. So we have a total, the other two is a pair, a male and a female. And in fact, this morning they tell me they have actually been interacting, although it's still tentative, as one would expect. And so we hope to follow up with some video of them interacting. And again, I mentioned that because if you're interested in following this, let Andy or me know. We will be forwarding updates, and we're happy to just send us an email. Because over the next 10 months, all three of these bears are going to be with us, learning to interact together, growing, rehabilitating. We will have them over the winter. And in fact, late in the fall, we'll begin to adjust their food to match what would be a normal winter food type, helping them adjust to hibernation or near hibernation. They may not completely hibernate with us, but their den will, where they're staying will be adjusted to be more like a winter type den. We're trying to encourage them to mimic hibernation, if not fully hibernate. And during this, they'll continue to grow, And in next spring, mid-spring sometime, when the snow is melted and food is plentiful in the wild, we should be able to return them back to their natural home as yearlings. They'll hopefully be weighing around 150 pounds, and we'll try our best to release them in conjunction with the Department of Natural Resources for Washington in an area as near to where they were found as possible. We want them to truly go back to their homes. And so if you're interested in following the progress, let us know. It's a pretty exciting and important part of the work we do, thanks to all the people that partner and help us. So that's the latest on our bear cubs. So.
All right. Well, if anyone has any questions about the bear cub or about estate planning, will creation, anything that Patrick covered, you're welcome to either drop that in the chat if you'd like, or you can unmute yourself by clicking on the little microphone button in the bottom left of your screen. If you're on video, you can raise your hand and I'll try and call on you, or we have the little raise hand button that you can use. Or if you're feeling bold enough, go ahead and just start talking and we'll take your question. Will the bear cubs be tagged? That is a great question. The bear cubs will that is determined by the Department of Fish and Wildlife, and it depends on what they're doing in terms of their studies of the bear populations. So occasionally, if they're in the middle of a more extensive study, they'll actually even go so far as having GPS collars on the bears. But any identification of the bears themselves is up to Fish and Wildlife. So we won't know until we get closer to the release how those bears will be tracked and identified once they're returned. Good question. Yes, Doug, I see your hand. You're going to have to unmute yourself, or maybe Sydney can help you. Oh, still muted. Hold on.
I can't force. Oh, there you go.
There we go. Hi, Doug. We gotcha.
Okay, Patrick, could you explain the difference between a will and a trust, and would I need both or one or the other?
Yeah, great question, Doug. And again, this isn't full-blown legal advice, so I'll just say that before I get started. Many people are doing one or the other these days, or a trust and then sort of a backup will. What's the big difference? A trust is more complicated and more expensive to maintain and more expensive to create. And it frequently helps things go outside of the probate process when it is time to realize the trust, right? A will tends to be more standard, a little bit easier to create, a little bit easier to make updates. And then when the process is done, it goes through probate process, which can be relatively easy depending on your state. California in particular has a relatively onerous probate process right now. And so many Californians are moving to what's called an RLT, or revocable living trust. And so in California in particular, people are choosing to lean trusts more, but it really varies state by state. So for many people, a will be sufficient.
No. Thank you.
You're welcome. Oh.
We have a question in the chat from Jane. Jane is wondering, what are the things that invalidate self-prepared wills? That's a really, really good question.
Great question. So the biggest thing is not what we call executing it correctly. So it needs to be signed in front of several witnesses. And typically, not only is it signed, it's also notarized at that time. So that's a really important process. Otherwise, what happens is the court has to track down Chuck and Doug and say, hey, did you really witness this? Because we can't tell if it's your signature. And so that you don't want that. So typically it ends up being notarized. That's the biggest area. Typically courts will do their best to interpret the results or the intentions of a self-prepared will, as long as it's that. Now, I actually don't know what the law is in Seattle. In some states, there's something called a holographic will, which is if you actually handwrite it in your own handwriting, it can be valid without witnesses. that's not really, it's extremely uncommon. What happens, it's sort of someone who is in an accident or in their last moments. And so that should not be your plan. Don't do that generally. It looks like Warren was unmuting to ask a question. Is that right, Warren?
Yeah, actually, I can make it a follow-up on the question you just answered. I was curious, given that state issues are related to state law rather than federal law, is there a lot of variability in the enforceability of a free will document among states? Washington State specifically is something. Have there been cases where enforceability is called into question?
Yeah, so we have gone over this sort of state by state, and our lawyers have as well, which has been, as you can imagine, quite a bit of work. And as a quick side note, 49 states are relatively similar. And then Louisiana is based on Napoleonic Code and not English common law. So there's a whole other set of back-end software for Louisiana. But yes, they're enforceable in Washington State, as well as virtually every other state, or certainly every other state. Although we don't focus right now on US territories. So I assume that no one is calling in from Puerto Rico or Guam, but the focus is less there. But yes, on Washington State, there's been there's a long history of various court cases, not necessarily around free will, but around similar things as well. And so we've studied up and done all the prep work with our attorneys for Washington State and the other 49.
Great. Any other questions for Patrick or Larry?
Andy, let me just add one thing. I'm in Washington. Holographic wills, handwritten wills are accepted, but they have to have the same attestation with 2 witnesses and verified by an affidavit or a notary. So it can't. It's still you can handwrite it, but you still need all of the formal attestation in Washington.
Thank you, Larry. That is why I am glad you are part of the PAWS team, because you are always bringing a level of nuance to the conversation, which I appreciate. Jane has another great question here. Patrick, if you had to describe someone who's a bad candidate for a free will, who does free will not work very well for?
Yeah, well, as I mentioned earlier, free will is a great tool to prepare for everyone. And then when you think about finalizing the documents, when you go through the whole process, you answer all these questions, there will be 2 options for you. The first is print out my legal will, which you'll then sign and notarize. The second is print out what we call documented wishes. And so the real question is, for whom are the documented wishes a better idea versus a legal will? The documented wishes is what you would then bring to an attorney. So for instance, do you have a pending divorce, or do you have several stepchildren, potentially with different partners? Do you have an exceedingly large estate? That's a good time where you really want to prepare your documents and then make sure they're finalized with an attorney. Do you have property across quite a few states or several countries? Do you have a special needs child who might need some sort of more complex trust, as opposed to simply receiving an inheritance, even as an adult? Things like that are things to think about. For those groups of people, the more complex groups of people, estate planning is even more important, right? Because these things will be quite complicated if they end up in courts. You want to make sure you have your decisions made. And if you'd like to, it's a good route to sort of document everything and then bring it to an attorney. So it's not that anyone's a bad candidate for estate planning generally, but in terms of requiring the assistance of an attorney, those are a couple of things. Of course, the decision's always up to you all. And so our work is really around helping people do their estate planning, not necessarily that it all needs to happen online or that it all needs to happen on an attorney. We just need to make sure that you're taking the first step and really making the decisions that are important to you.
Great. And Patrick, this is my own question, but I'm asking it for the benefit of our audience. What's the catch with free will? I mean, is there, how does How does the relationship work? Can you describe a little bit how the relationship works between nonprofits like PAWS and FreeWill and what that means for the end user of the product?
Sure. So as you can probably tell by the name, it's a totally free for the end users. And the way that we work well is that we'll team up with something like PAWS, and PAWS will sponsor it for all of their donor base. It's certainly the case that it's in part because it makes it much easier for folks, including you all, to potentially include PAWS in their estate plans, but also because it's a really important thing for the community. And so it's totally free, whether you leave everything to charity or nothing to charity. It's the option's totally yours. And so, but that's how our model works. So we work with more than 800 nonprofits, ranging from Wikipedia and Doctors Without Borders to a tiny volunteer-run dog shelter. And so my colleague Sydney's here and works with probably about 60, and it's just such a delight to be able to work with such amazing organizations across the board.
Great. Thank you for clarifying, Patrick. Yeah, I wanted folks to know that there's no obligation to include any nonprofits in your plans. You know, this is all about you creating a plan that works for you and for your family and for your future. There's a question in the chat, and then I see Thayer has a question as well. The question in the chat is approximately how much do attorneys charge for finalizing wills? Patrick, I'm not sure if you have a ballpark there. A lot of it varies region to region.
It varies region to region, and it certainly varies lawyer to lawyer. I mean, I think that for the most part, you'll see a couple $100s to a couple $1,000s as the range. And then if you have an extremely complex estate, usually because it's so large, you might be looking at $10,000. But that would involve a lot of, a very, very high degree of complexity and some very expensive lawyers.
Great. And then Thayer, would you like to ask your question? I see your hand raised.
Well, hello, how are you?
Hello.
And thank you for putting this on. This is the Frog Lady from Just Frogs Foundation in Edmonds, and we're a partner, and we take all your lovely animals.
Fantastic.
So and so this month has been an interesting month for me to do the will. And we are setting up that to the point that here's a question for you. May we put a percentage or donate to multiple nonprofits?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I see you shaking your head. Okay.
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's what Patrick was saying earlier about often when people have multiple organizations that they want to support through their estate, that's when they'll set up a percentage of either a portion of an estate that they've set aside or the residual of their estate. That's where those percentages come in.
Okay, there's the answer. Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you for your question. All right. Do I see Pam raising her hand too? Hi, Pam. You're on mute, so you're going to have to press the little. Oh, perfect. You got it. All right.
I apologize because I'm tardy and I had a call prior to this, but this is so fascinating to me, and it is such great timing because I recently retired. My mother passed. She passed along a large portion of funds to me. And I have not put together a will, and I'm at the age where I definitely should put together a will. And so this is of incredible interest to me because I am, involved with PAWS. I am involved with, multiple animal shelter, ventures and rescues. So this is, I'm just enthralled. So how do I contact you? What do I do to, further this relationship and get my will, together and get this moving?
Yeah, Pam, thank you so much for sharing and for
And
thinking of PAWS with everything going on. Don't apologize at all. No, we're coming up to the end of our session too.
Yeah.
So you are giving us a great way to reiterate for everyone what they can do next if they're ready.
Okay.
So I'm going to drop an email. No, you're great. If you'd like to talk to someone at PAWS more about a gift in a will or something that you'd like to plan or have us involved in, you can email Larry Simons. He's over here with the orange background.
Yeah.
And I'll type it into the chat, but it's lsimons@paws.org. We're going to send a follow-up email to all of you too.
Oh, great.
Oh,
Okay.
Sydney's right on top of it. Sydney's got our emails in the chat
Oh,
right
fabulous.
here.
Oh, awesome.
So if you want to talk to PAWS,
Patrick as
you can
well?
reach us.
Okay, awesome.
And then if you have, we can answer your questions about the FreeWill tool as well. And then
Okay,
if
great.
you are leaving this session and feeling like you are ready to get your will going, you just go
am.
to freewill.com/pause. And then
Great.
that webpage will take you through all of the steps that you need to take and ask you those questions to help you make your plan.
Patrick put that link in the chat
Patrick,
also, just
yeah,
above our
Patrick,
address.
yeah.
So
Yes, he did.
Yes,
Thank you,
That
Patrick.
was great. Thank you so much.
Yes.
Yeah, fabulous. Awesome.
Oh, and someone is asking a question about our new facility, which I am very happy to answer. Yes, some of you are hopefully aware that we are in the process of building a new PAWS facility in Snohomish, just off of Highway 9. That is going to be a new wildlife center that covers about 25 acres of just really nice, secluded, natural setting for our wild patients. So we're thrilled. We cannot wait for that to happen. Just last month, we received a building permit, which allows us to move forward with constructing the first portion of that building, which is the wildlife hospital. So that is the biggest, most technical part of the building. It's a big hurdle to clear. We anticipate that hospital building will be up and fully constructed by the end of 2021. And then depending on our fundraising and construction progress, we hope to have the recovery habitats and the rest of the care building completed sometime in 2022. You know, that's pretty aggressive considering how weird the world is that we're living in, but that is the plan that we are working towards. And if you have any questions about the facility, I could talk about that for another webinar session. So you're welcome to email me and I'd be happy to give you a more thorough update if that's something you're curious about. I'm always glad when people ask about it because it's exciting stuff. Okay, well, folks, that brings us to 4:45, and we said that we would get you all out of here around that time. If you're leaving here today with questions, please do email us and look out for a recording of this session if there's anything you want to go back and review again. And again, thank you so much for taking time out to have this really important discussion with us. This is a great month to be doing this, and I appreciate you all taking interest in this topic. And we're here to support you as you develop your plans. All right. Thanks, everyone. Take care.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Bye all.
Bye.
Thank you so much. Have a frogtastic day.
Love it. Love it there. That's wonderful. Bye-bye.
Bye.